is that a homemade coffee or is that a store bought?
Yeah, it's how's it called? I think it's the geyser type coffee machine. So it's just a small pot with geyser inside.
That's cool. Yeah, I actually know of someone who doesn't have a coffee machine at home, so they actually like their reason to go into the office during this partially remote thing was because their barista was there and she like didn't have a coffee machine and she could not bring herself to buy that instant coffee. So she actually went into the office to get a coffee from her barista, which I think is quite funny. The things we do for caffeine, it's like yeah, it is a drug, I guess, to a certain degree.
Yeah, it's a drug for sure. Yes, I was on a diet for like a week, uh, a month ago, and then I had to cut coffee, and I had like a physical withdrawal symptoms.
Yeah. What is that? I mean, how did that look for you? I'm interested to know because I think I also have certain withdrawals, but it's generally like it. I feel it more in the morning than I do
Yeah,
at any point in the day.
yeah, it's more in the morning, so until like 11 p.m. If I don't, I mean 11 a.m. If I don't drink coffee, like a few hours after I wake up, I just start feeling the headache.
Mm.
And then after that, if I don't drink, it goes further. Like I don't know, I have like slightly pumped up veins and stuff like that. So it's a bit scary. But I read an article that it should be there like for 2 weeks, and after 2 weeks, you're basically good. So your
Yeah.
caffeine receptors are back to normal.
Yeah, and I think if it is something you want to reduce, that it's probably a better idea to do it gradually. So to like
Yeah,
have less and less coffee every day than just like overnight stop, because then yeah, I think
yeah, for sure.
your physiological response will be much more intense. But cool. I had a bunch of questions that I wanted to ask you that you didn't prepare for, but they're more like questions to learn a bit about you. One of them was whether you take tea or coffee, so I think we've answered that question already.
Yeah,
Um, but I'm just going to run through them very quickly. Don't think too hard about them. Sort of say what comes to mind. And yeah, we'll just have some fun with these. Should be very easy. But so first one. After a really tiring day, how do you spend your evening?
Um, so it's either playing games. I play Apex Legends with friends, or reading books, or I have evening training. So it's rowing or jiu-jitsu.
Fun. That's cool. And what's a really good book that you've read recently?
So I just finished the Neuromancer by William Gibson.
Hmm.
I read in Elon Musk biography now.
Nice. Do you find yourself reading books in Ukrainian as well, or do you just read in English?
I mostly read in English because first I want to build my vocabulary. It's I consider it's quite poor, but I feel an improvement from reading books now.
Yeah.
And I still have a few books in Ukrainian that I want to read, and we have a beautiful poetry here. So I just try to switch from time to time because I read that it's quite good for your brain to just switch between languages.
I wish I read more German books. I think I should take that a bit more seriously because I feel yeah, it really helps, and I think we'll get to this just now. I'm gonna bank that thought for a little introduction. But just another question here: what is something that you wish existed but doesn't?
Dog to human translator.
Oh my god, that is
I just want to speak to
that
animals.
is a really cool idea. I forgot about
Yeah.
that. I think I used to want that as well. And then last question: what is something that's cost you less than 50 euros but has been the best investment most recently?
I would think books. So I write. I like reading the physical books, and for me, it's just always a nice experience to go into a bookshop, just browse some stuff. So I have a list of things I want to read, but I always buy some extra stuff when I go there, and it's usually like 10 euros a
Yeah.
piece. So it's like for 50 euros you can get 5 books, and it would keep you occupied for quite a time.
Cool. Thanks for participating. That was a interesting little insight, and the thought that I wanted to just mention here as well, because I thought that was really cool. On your point of reading books in English to improve your vocabulary, something which is really cool about you, Yevhen, is that when you moved to Amsterdam first, you knew very little English, and that was like you learned the language on the go, and you learned the language through speaking and working and reading in English, which I think is must have been quite a scary thing.
Yeah, for sure. I did. So I learned English from like 10 years old, but at some time, like before the period between high school and my first job, I didn't speak English at all. And then at the first job, I did speak to clients sometimes. So I worked in an outsource company, but it wasn't like daily conversation. So it wasn't smoke talk, and that's something that I had to learn in English. And I'm kind of introverted person, so it's always I just tried to push myself to go to meetups. I was just made a list of things that I like and just was trying to find people who are interested in the same things and just go to meet up and push myself to talk. But I think it worked quite well. But also, I had a good team at work, so we hang out a lot, and it also helped. And the other things that I did that I think is really good is just to train your ear, because sometimes when you don't understand and don't catch the full phrase, it's hard to ask people to repeat, and you feel like I don't know, just you're stupid and you ask stupid questions. But just from understanding, you are more comfortable, you are more confident to keep the conversation going. So what I did, I started with podcasts, because in podcasts it's just easier to first, it's conversational, and you can grab the real language, the real conversational language. And the second thing is that it's not that bad if you miss some parts, and you don't always have to rewind and re-listen it. So I moved gradually from podcast to audiobooks now, and I still try to keep meetups, but the coronavirus is not the like. Yeah, I think I'll wait till winter for
Yeah.
that to come back.
I think that's really interesting you say podcast, because something I found, I used to learn or I studied Italian in high school, and I mean, my heritage is German, so that's like a language I still try and keep up. But
Mm,
I used to in Italian, when studying, you would read things, and it was
mm,
very easy to come across a word you didn't know, and you sort of stopped, which made it very hard to keep momentum in like comprehending, because you would stop at a word and you'd like find it and try and understand it. Um, but with German, what I used to do and still try and do now is listen to radio. And to your point, is very interesting, because if you don't know a word, you don't really have the option to pause it. You sort of just have to keep going.
yeah,
And as you said, it helps you. You don't have to understand every single word to get the general context, but over time, um, you will pick up those words, either because you'll see it somewhere and it'll be easier to like understand what it means in that context. But I think audio is a very cool way, and maybe it's a cool way to sort of double up your learning. But I do like that forcing
yeah,
function where you don't have the option to stop at every single word, and it forces you to kind of keep going. And try and see the bigger picture or get the broader understanding of what's being said, which in reality is a lot more useful, because when people communicate with you, they're not going to always write stuff down. They're going to talk to you, and you have to be able to sort of just
yeah,
get the understanding. So I find that really, really interesting. But unfortunately, this is not a language podcast. I could talk about it forever. I think it's really, really interesting.
yeah.
But it is really cool to have you on the podcast. And I've been practicing your name. Am I saying it a bit better?
Yeah, a little bit, but I think you still. I
Okay.
think your language don't has this three strong G like Yevgen. So,
Yeah.
but it's quite.
Okay. So I will say it many times in different ways, and then I will just cut the one that's the best and just use that
Okay.
throughout the episode. But it's really cool to have you. And I thought, just as an introduction, could you Just for anyone who doesn't know about
Mhm.
TomTom as a company, because that's the company where you are a dev. What problem does TomTom solve as a company? Like, what is your main mission, I
Yeah.
guess?
So we are location technology specialists, and that means that we sell all the products related to location, starting from the map data, coming to map visualization, traffic services, navigation, like as algorithms and the whole engine, selling APIs for location products, and coming up with like customer products as iOS apps, PND devices. PND is a personal navigation device, I think. I'm
Yeah.
I hope so. Uh, then what we also do is that we have contracts with big automotive customers, so we have our system, our navigation system, pre-installed on some cars. Um, yeah, that's basically it in as a gist. But there is a lot more
Yeah.
to that, and we do move with the world as soon as it evolves. We do try to come up with a way to keep up with it. So we are still we are doing stuff in autonomous driving. We are
Mm,
transitioning to online world because the cars become more connected. We also do some like we collaborate with cities because in Europe, for example, we have this new thing as a congestion zones. The congestion zone is that basically on some old cars you can't enter the city center because it's kind of just polluting it.
yeah. I think what's really interesting, and you sort of gave me some insight into this the last time we spoke as well. But I think people may have had experience with TomTom as that little thing that you stick in your car with a map on
Yeah.
it. But like a step to take a step behind that, and as you said, you're doing moving into autonomous driving, and like, what does it mean when an entire car is connected to the internet, and how does that affect navigation? And in a world that is like the map, the map of the world, or the surface of the world has a digital version, and you get to play in that space. So I think it's really exciting, and yeah, I think we'll probably hear some of those different sides to TomTom that people don't know in this conversation. But how big is your tech team roughly? And I know you work like you are quite a big company. But how big is your tech team? Like, what does your immediate team look like?
So my immediate team is 10 people, I think. Our like more bigger team is 20, around 20 developers now, but we are because I work for the iOS application. Basically, we are developing the navigator for drivers for iPhone, and we are sitting on top of TomTom stack in terms of technology. So all the other teams are contributing to our product by providing map visualization engine, map data, navigation. That's all done by other teams, and these teams are quite big. So it's like there are some products which counts like I don't know, few hundred developers or so, and yeah, we hire more and more.
And I mean, as you just said, you're an iOS
Yeah.
engineer there in your team. But what is your like main day-to-day focus? Like, what is your main responsibility, I guess? And what kind of stuff do you work on?
It moves from time to time. I really like to be involved in the like product thinking, brainstorming stuff. So that's what I try to do. So I try to help product managers to just answer some questions. I do some prototype to just think whether some technology or some solution would fit us. I do research the new APIs that Apple gives us. Like, for example, there's just WWDC this summer, and there are a bunch of new stuff that we could use. We are working on using it. And apart from that, I do coding uh, a bit less now, but it depends on time of the year and whether we have some new features to develop. And code reviews. We do a little experiment now in our team. It's called I think, empower teams.
Hmm.
So that's the way for a team to make a product decision, and just don't to have them more empowered, and to have them more like have a sense of ownership in the product they make. Because sometimes some time ago we try to ask about everything, uh, our product owners and product managers, and it created this like long feedback loops. And when you're basically, you think you're stuck but you're not stuck, so there is some decisions that you can still make as an engineer, uh, and just unblock yourself and evaluate some pros and cons, and just try to come up. So we do it this way, but here are the risks that we have, and then just have a first version of something, then come up with the risks, and then iterate with the product managers and try to find the optimal solution. So that's
That's cool. So it's like giving what's the word, like it's like decision
yeah,
authority back to engineers, and letting you like unblock yourself, as you said, and try and work with what you can control so that you can get to a first working version. And yeah, that's an interesting model.
yeah. And it works great for us because it also enables, so we try like every sprint, we try to come up with some deliverables, not always for production. We have a big beta community, but in each release we have something that goes to the end users. And this creates kind of stuff that we focus on the small things, and
Hmm.
enables more of collaboration between developers. So we do pair programming. We just split one like a user story into several parts, just so people could work together, and then merge the stuff into one. So for example, one person works on kind of front end parts, another person works on business logic, and then they just glue it together, even though it's just one user story.
So I assume, I mean, other than that helps you work faster because you're not blocked by stuff. Are there other benefits to that you found, or that you haven't expected but have appeared?
Yeah, one of the benefits is that, well, this empowering, it really reflects on team's mood. So every developer feels a sense of ownership, and they have um, they're kind of more obsessed, and they become more user centric. So they think about users
Hmm.
and what is the end result, and not only about code. And that helped us to, for example, speed up code reviews a bit, because previously it was one of the bottlenecks that we have. So, for example, I don't know, people work on their task and just don't have time to review, so some pull requests are stuck. And for other parts, they have a lot of arguing about small things. I don't know, some naming and stuff, and just skip the actual like the user problems. So now it's I think a bit user centric, and also a bit like empowering for the team. So the team would change completely, and it's just a span of half a year, and we are constantly iterating the process, trying to make it better. So we also previously had like on some meetings like retrospectives. Not everyone was involved because they felt that, I don't know, they didn't contribute that much, or they don't have something to add. So now that changed drastically. Even for people who were always shy and didn't talk, now everyone is talking, and everyone is trying to contribute because they feel like they can change the process.
And why is user-centric development so important to you? What difference does that make?
um, I think it's just makes you a better engineer, because if you think about engineering, it's not only coding, right? Coding is just writing some solutions that you develop, and by being more user centric, you think about problems, not the solutions. Because previously, when we were writing some code, you just think that, okay, I spent 2 weeks on this, but even though it doesn't solve some user problems, it's still good and it still works. We should do it. So now it's more like we try to find all the problems that user would face, and then think about the actual solutions.
I like the point you made of being more focused on the problems and the solutions, because that helps you.
Yeah,
My assumption there is that it helps you continuously evolve the product and not like reach a point and say, "Cool, that was the solution." That you continuously think about. Yeah, think about the problem. I think that's cool. Problem
for
driven.
sure. And it's even more important in like the project as our, because it's we have a lot of legacy code. The project lifespan, I think it's about
Hmm.
7 or 8 years now, and the from the initial team we have like 1 or 2 people, so there is really huge code base, and as a developer you tend to do things as they are now, and this approach helped us to just reevaluate some things, reevaluate the like patterns that we use, the solutions that we use, so that it could better fit the actual problem and actually bootstrap our like the evolution of our code base.
And that also probably helps with making your product like I think the term here would be like anti-fragile, that like in future it's easier to change and easier to adapt as you go. So that's, yeah, that's interesting. I didn't think like user-centric development could actually help with like that kind of where you have legacy code. And yeah, that's interesting point. Also, last time we spoke, you were also telling me about like a recent project that you worked on where you were assigned the project lead for a distributed team of developers. And I think at that point, um, you hadn't really had that kind of team lead experience before. So it was in and of itself a learning experience for you. And, to add to that, your team was distributed, which I think a lot of people have had some experience with by now. But it still was a very new experience for you. And I think the problem itself was just a challenge, and a new problem for you to solve. So there were like many things that you had to be really deliberate about, and many lessons that you took away from that, which you're going to most likely apply going forward. But just briefly, could you just give me some insight into like what was the scope of that project in particular, or what was the problem that you needed to solve?
Yeah, so it was 2018 when it started. So it was summer of 2018 when Apple on WWDC introduced support for third-party apps, third-party navigation apps on CarPlay. And as a CarPlay is a new technology, our users became like really obsessed about it as soon as this news came. Basically, it was like a vocal minority that populates our reviews and our feedback channels. So we understood that we need to do it, and basically it meant that we need to support CarPlay in a way that it's a small app within the app. So it has some user flows that we already have. It has totally different kind of this UI frameworks because it's more limited than the usual iOS development. So Apple tried to limit the user interfaces and limit the ways that we don't control the layout, for example, in some cases. So it looks more or less the same, and also it's more safe for the drivers. So they just get used to the same interface within the CarPlay, and they don't have to tap a lot or just to interact with the head unit. So the first challenge here is that it's an app within the app, so it's a small replica of our app with totally different UI framework. The other thing is that it's completely new API, and even within like the moment that it came up, it changed a few iterations within the summer. So we had to work in this environment, and when we had to rewrite some code just because the API changed while we were developing it. The other thing is that I think our code base wasn't ready to have the two apps running at the same time in a way that um, we couldn't, like, for example, we have a software where we can show the navigation on external display, but the CarPlay is not real external display. So it has a map, but it also has the UX flows like finding a place to go and starting the navigation. But also it's very limited, so we couldn't translate all the features there. So it meant that we would still need rendering on the phone, like the map rendering on the phone, to complete the actions that we couldn't do on CarPlay yet. And it brought a challenge on itself. And then also we had two teams. So one team was in Amsterdam, and there was a recently joined team in Serbia, and they came from the different projects. So they worked on TomTom Sports, with a great product with some wearables, but it was totally different mood. So it wasn't this enterprisey legacy code as in the main TomTom product. So it was like a startup within TomTom, and they write it everything from scratch. They write, like, use the new technologies like Swift and other things. So um, it was a bit different. It was a challenge on their own for them, and the CarPlay part, because it's app within the app, we saw it as a beautiful opportunity to just make them understand how the project works, because they build it in like the small scale. They basically rebuild the product, and then later, after a few months of development, the Amsterdam team also joined them. So I was the one who was there from the beginning, from the initial prototypes to the production delivery.
So what were you looking over just the Amsterdam team? Was that your sort of the team that you were leading, or did you have the Serbian team within that as well?
um, yeah, the I was leading both teams, so we came up
Right.
with a way for us to move forward, because we needed to share the knowledge with the Serbian team, but also there were some deliveries that we need to do in Amsterdam. So I was assigned as kinda the tech lead on Amsterdam part, on the old legacy part of code, because even though they could develop biggest part in CarPlay on their own, like UX flows and stuff, but they still need the data, they still need the map visualization, navigation, and all the things that we have
Yeah.
in Amsterdam. Well, not in Amsterdam, but in the old app. And
Yeah.
so basically, my job from the beginning was that I go with them. We try to oversee the architecture, and I try to extract the parts that they could reuse in the CarPlay app. And later on, the
Right.
like basically everyone, as soon as the foundation layer was ready, everyone from Amsterdam, even, we joined the CarPlay development, because we needed to deliver quite a lot.
And is that kind of like project based team lead thing common at TomTom? Is that something that happens quite regularly?
Um, well, I couldn't say for the whole TomTom. So if you think about our company, we have quite different needs and different teams, because there are like teams that deliver map data, and they have almost like daily, weekly deliverables. There are teams that develop navigation engine or automotive deals, and they have like a uh, long like feature span, and long delivery cycles. Like it could be half a year or something like this. So in this way, we have a control on the team level to decide on the process that suits us best. We have the company level processes like OKRs that come from the top level, like business objectives, and we need to think how we can contribute to it as a team. And the concept with the feature based leads came from it was already there, but we reiterated a bit and took some parts from Uber. So basically, how it works is that we see the roadmap with product managers, and we have kind of a release cycle of 2 months. So it basically means that we take the next items for 2 months on our backlog. We still in agile way, so we can just remove or add something based on I don't know, some external factors or internal factors. But for these features that we take from backlog, we try to think who would be the best kind of oversee it. And also the product managers and business people, they need one point of contact about the feature, because sometimes it goes like in a very long cycle when there is no single source of contact. And so basically each release we pick the leads for the features, and these leads, what they do is that they start refining the features with product management, and then when features are ready, they pick the team who would actually do it, like pick some people and try to find, like for example, there are old C++ parts, and they're mostly are developed in our Poland team. So sometimes you need help from them, and you just try to think forward and to understand what kind of dependencies you have, and assemble the team that suits the feature best. And then in the end, well, you are the one who is accountable for this feature. So if there are any questions, if there are any problems, bugs, you are the one to answer to that.
What you said there, I think, is a good sort of springboard for the next question I had. But this idea of it being like a point of contact, or you being like accountable for the team, so that it's an easy way to communicate. But I think also, like, based on, you had like an app within an app, you had a startup within TomTom, you had like two teams in different countries, and also you were trying to develop while the thing was changing as you were developing. What were some of your other like responsibilities? What were your like what were the things you had to do on a daily or weekly basis as a team lead in order to do that well, or to see that project through?
So I think it starts from the kind of planning. So we have a 2 week sprint. So as a tech lead of the particular feature, you see the stuff that you can intake for these 2 weeks. You try to
Right.
understand how many dependencies are there, how many I don't know, user stories could be developed in parallel, and you try to find the people who are free now or would be free in 2 weeks, or are actually needed for the particular part, because for some parts there are like only a few people who know this stuff well. And from there you are the point of contacts for product managers, product owners, and UX designers. We still try to do that. There are some product decisions that could be made just for one of the teammates, so you don't always have to have tech leads there for product decisions, but you just need to keep him or her in the loop. And from that, you are the one who oversees the architecture. Yeah, I did also code some things, and basically you are the one who sees how the team performs, if there are delays, why there are delays, and what can we improve in the process. So I don't know, we communicate better and we move faster.
So it sounds pretty much like like almost like a normal tech lead
Yeah.
role. Apart from, did you have to do much, or what was the requirement from you from a team support level? I think that's the only thing that which like stuck out now. Is it's very like road mapping, finding the right people, knowing what features to build, being a point of contact. Do you still have to do a lot of, like, if someone has a really big problem, that you go in, you support them, or like running one-on-ones, or like doing team connection and team cohesion? Did that also form part of your role, or is it because it's such a short project, or a temporary project, I guess, that doesn't really fit into your responsibility?
Well, I would say that it wasn't officially part of the role, but it's a good thing to do, because if you think about it, you try to assign the best people for the best task. But for example, for CarPlay, we had to refactor a lot of stuff in the main app to just extract it and reuse the code. So for that, there were people who are aware of the old stuff, and they were, I don't know, boiling in it for a long time, and it's quite exhaustive task mentally to just refactor stuff. You need to keep a lot of stuff in your mind, and you need to like make these connections, and just so it's quite exhaustive job. So what I try to do is that I've tried to see this the moments when someone is close to burn, and just try to switch a task for them, for example, to just work on some CarPlay part. And also maybe, I don't know, if I have time, I just go and help them. But also it's about connecting people that for example, we have a bit different cultures here in Amsterdam and in Serbia. And I could relate to Serbian culture because it is a Slavic culture that you're try to show that you can do a lot by yourself. But in this part that they're not really aware of the project and aware of the old stuff, it tends to lead to some mistakes, right? So I was trying to
Right.
oversee that where there are complex parts and where there are actually dependencies on our team, so that I just try to connect the people so they go about some feature or user story together and see how can they develop it.
It sounds like there's a software management part, but there's also a very human level
Yeah,
management part to your role as well, even though it is just a project based team lead. And that you have to be very sensitive to, like, okay, this person's very exhausted, or these people won't be able to do their job, or they'll get very frustrated if I don't connect them with these people. And that you have to be able to have your, I guess, finger on the pulse of picking that up and being able to support where you can.
yeah. And actually, I like this part of the job, and I think we still do have it, even though we rarely work on the big features in a distributed team now, because there are just smaller projects uh, within our app. But this part is really good, and I think that just for a team lead or tech lead, it's just the things that you imagine yourself on the place of your team or of your team members, and you just try to see and show empathy and just try to understand. If something takes long, it's not always just people can do it. It could be some reasons that I don't know, they just exhausted or something like that.
I think on that point, what I really like about project based team leads, where you move from being part of a team to leading a team, is that you are constantly made aware of what it feels like to be on both
Yeah,
sides. As opposed to someone who's a team lead for 5 years, I think it's easy to forget that sometimes, not because you're a bad person, but just because you haven't been on that side. And I mean, in your case, you literally went from like just being a senior dev to actually needing to lead a team. So that was like very fresh in your, in your conscience, which I think is interesting. But I'm curious because that seems really hard. Like I can't imagine what it must have been like to, like, now you're deciding features, you're communicating to product managers what you're doing, you're thinking about who the right people for the things are, you're trying to connect a team. Like that sounds like quite a tough thing. And like for someone who like hadn't really uh, had that role before that. I can imagine it must have been not without challenge and a lot of learning. So, yeah, I'm curious. Like, what are some of the things, some of the main challenges you faced in like your particular context, or what was surprisingly difficult for you?
um, I think the first part is that I will start with the product. So for me, I didn't have any experience in like selling the prototype, selling the features or some particular solutions to product people, and that part just was missing, because if you work in outsource, for example, you don't really do that. So you just I don't know, estimate the project and just come up with a solution, and that's it. But here you actually need it, because every feature, it's either this or that, and I mean gets delivered, and some could bring more value, some could bring less, and you are the one who actually providing the data for product management. So you need to
Mm.
understand how this data could be presented for them, so they do understand it, because some of them don't have technical background, for example. And that's the part that was quite hard for me. And I started with just I don't know, going and repeating the stuff, just like I want to do this because of that and that, and then I over a year, I think I went to just making the small prototypes. So, for example, if just a prototype for selling some feature on some solution, I just make it as soon as possible. It could have some like UX problems, but it's more or less like the happy flow for the user. And that what actually showed me that it gets easier for people to understand when you do present the information in the sense that they could comprehend it. Because I in the beginning I was talking a lot about some technical stuff and why we need to do this because of architecture and things. And then if you think from product manager perspective, you don't really care about architecture. You do trust your developers, but you want to think how it reflects on the user, how it reflects on the span of the feature, whether it takes months or 2 months to develop or something like this.
Right. So I mean that's interesting. Like pick the information that the person you're communicating with is going to want to hear. And even if you don't know, I think it's pretty easy to just chat to someone in your team and ask them, and be like, as a product manager, if I were to tell you about this, what kind of questions would you want answered? And to frame your data like that. And I think that's interesting because data is another one of those things that you could just get a lot of, but it could be completely useless. So to actually know what data you need and how to present that, I think is really interesting. And yeah, as you said, is not in the beginning probably not something you think of immediately because you come from a different sort of mindset. So that's interesting. So I guess you said the lesson there was to yeah, pick the data that the person you're speaking to, in your case a product manager, knows. And yeah, I mean, were there any other challenges or lessons in that you came across on the product side?
Um, on the product side, well, for me, it was that you do make trade-offs a lot. So business is all about trade-offs.
Mm.
And if you commit for something, I don't know, for half a year, in this half a year, you could develop, I don't know, 10 features over one big feature. So it just, you always evaluate and the values that you bring and the speeds that you can bring it. And when I started understanding these trade-offs, it was just easier for me to also to just talk to product people and just to understand what I do. And it also helped a bit on our pull requests because as an engineer, you
Hmm.
try to do the best thing you can, and you try to oversee all the small problems and all the issues that users or I don't know your code may face, like the code branches that have really small percent like really small chance of happening, but you still know about them. That's why you need to fix it. So with this change of mindset, it helped us to focus on the things that really matter. So if we see some risk, if we see some problems, we just communicate it directly to product managers, and we try to move in iterations. So we do deliver something, but maybe not as perfect as it could be, but it still brings some value for users. Because if, for example, I don't know, it's you have no speed cameras in the app, or you have some speed cameras but some warnings are missing or something like this, it's still better than having nothing. Uh,
And what are the yeah? I was going to ask, are those your kids or are those
no,
neighbors'
those
kids?
neighbors' kids. I'll just close the window. One sec.
All good. Children are children. I feel sorry. I'm just glad people can let them go outside. I can imagine it must be like, imagine that indoors. I'm sure whoever's children they are, they're happy that it's outside, not inside.
Yeah, man, I can imagine because it's I live on seventh floor and it's quite
Uh-huh.
loud. I mean, if you stand there, yeah, could be you
Yeah.
need some noise canceling headphones.
Yeah. So thankfully we have those. But just on that point, like, what are the so in terms of trade-offs that you were talking about, what is different about making a trade-off as a team lead versus being, or a tech lead versus being like a software developer? Because I think as a dev, you have to make trade-offs in certain scenarios as well. But is it just because the stakes are higher? Like you're now trading off like on two different ways the roadmap could go, or the business impact maybe is a bit greater. But what is the difference
Yeah, I
for
think it's
you?
just the level of trade-offs is higher, so you could actually influence the roadmap, and you could think that for example, I know we have alternatives route feature, and we say that, well, we could bring one alternatives route, but we need to refactor a lot of stuff for that. And in meanwhile, we could develop something like, I don't know, alerts for speed cameras, traffic, and other things that also bring value. So it's more like brainstorming constantly with product management and trying to understand what actually brings more value. But also, it's just about overseeing the bigger picture. So what is enough for us as an MVP of the, for example, CarPlay support? What would be the next? And just try to verify some hypothesis, like I don't know. We think that some feature is more needed than the others, and we just try to make the first iteration of one and see what is the feedback through beta users.
And how do you, like, what lessons did you learn about making trade-offs? Or maybe you can also give some examples of like a trade-off you had to make and how you decided to do that, or how you picked which one to trade off.
Some of the things that we did, as I said, like we had a very long list of features that we have in the app because it was developed for 5 or 6 years till that point, and we had to understand whether we could translate this to the CarPlay, how we can do it, how much time would it take, and how much value would it bring. So in the end, I had kind of a table where I had each feature when we just make some kind of technical spikes, small prototypes to understand um, how does it look in CarPlay and whether it's even possible there. And for each feature, we had like pros, cons, and etc. And we had evaluated each feature based on this data, and this data that basically we as a team provided to product management that they could understand this. And then there were some trade-offs in terms of user experience because the CarPlay didn't allow some stuff, so we had to either come up with the ways that we could improve it, or, for example, uh, CarPlay limited the number of list items in a list to 12 items, so users don't have to scroll a lot because it's, well, you could scroll while driving, which you shouldn't do, but you still can. But and we thought about all the destination lists that we have. Like, for example, we have recent destinations, we have my places, search, etc., and we needed to understand whether we need to do something with this. So in the end, we did uh, for lists that are user generated that we don't control, we did kind of reload mechanisms that you could just go to the next page. And for all other lists, we just left the small items and were trying to work more on relevancy rather than just trying to add a mechanism for pagination or something like that.
So what it sounds like is that the way you were making trade-offs was you had varying kinds of what's the word, like criteria, like time it would take to finish and the kind of value it would bring to users, and that you sort of plotted it on, in your case, like a table, or plotted it in a table, and sort of decided, like, for each feature whether the time it would take and the sort of impact on the user, and as you said, there were others as well, but sort of use those and then take that back. And I think you also said you brainstormed that with product managers, so it wasn't something where you just made a decision and had to go with it. You sort of said, this is like where we're at, this is what I'm thinking, and to actually work with product managers to then make those trade-offs. And yeah, as you said, I think what's really important about trade-offs is to know why you're trading something off, and also what trade-offs you're making, as opposed to just picking something and going ahead with that you actually are aware of what you're not doing, which I think at least in my experience I found has been really useful for when that thing goes wrong. You can actually take it back, like take a few steps back and say, oh, we decided to do this because of X, where we should have actually done this thing. But if you hadn't been aware of those trade-offs beforehand, You wouldn't have any data to point to. The thing would have just gone wrong, and it would have been like, okay, now what?
Yeah, for sure. Because if you don't have data, you basically making a guess, right? And so it's a decision that is not backed up by something, and you can't really evaluate it, as you say. So that really helped us to just actually record all the data that we have, and it was always back and forth process. So I was saying like, this is what's possible, these are the risks, and then product management came back to me like, but like we need to do this, or this is a core feature. What are the alternatives? What, like, can we explore something like this? And then you go to UX and just try to think some solution. So that's, I think, what different from the developer point of view, because usually you're assigned to some part of a feature, or not like this big project in general, and you don't really, well, you do influence roadmap, but you really influence it on refinements.
Yeah, and I think as you said, it also being able to talk about trade-offs and risks makes it easier for you to communicate with product managers as a dev, because those are some of the stuff that they need to think about and that they care about. So that's all on the product side. Did you have any interesting challenges on more of a like a people management side? I know we already said that it's like being a project-based team tech lead
Yeah.
is as much people management as it is software management. So what was like hard for you about that?
I think it all starts with what I already told about. So we have a bit different culture here in Amsterdam and in Serbia, for example, in Poland office, and it's not it's not always easy to understand it, and to understand it not only from, I don't know, some personal point of view, just like as to understand someone as a person, but mostly to understand as someone like working approach, because you can imagine like there are 10 ways to do one task, and not even one of them bad, it's just a different way to do something. So for that, we did, so the previous model of work we had with the Serbian team is that we just assign some tasks to them. For example, they worked on some search related things and some prototypes before CarPlay, and we just give them the tasks, they do something, they ask some question, and then we see it on pull requests, code reviews, and we try to think how we can improve this model. And by improving it, we thought about just coming up with a wall architecture together. So basically, the parts that were needed is the foundation layer that mostly team in Amsterdam is um, more knowledge in, and the part which with a UI level which Serbian team was assigned to. So what I did as a tech lead, I just flew there and we worked together like for a week. So we were trying to come up with the prototypes, but also I saw like how they work and what they think. So that, I think, helps a lot, even though it's probably wouldn't be possible now with COVID. But what what we do now in a similar way is that sometimes I just call some of my teammates and we just kind of work together. Even it could be even some different features. Like, well, it's mostly related, but we just have like the chat on like in Discord channel, so everyone connects and they could just connect and talk, and you can just discuss the problems that you have. And that really helped. So just coming up with some architecture together, understanding what are the needs, and also when you speak in person or with video, you can see the reaction, right? You can understand when you explain something from the, I don't know, legacy code, you can understand whether people actually understand it. And if you don't see like the reactions that you understand it, you just need to provide more explanation and make it more transparent for them.
So what did knowing how different teams work and um, being able to understand that, I guess it's a cultural difference, as you said, between the two teams, but also on an individual level, certain people will have different ways that help them work better. How did that help you as a team lead, and what kinds of or in what ways did it help you on a day-to-day basis? I don't know if you can think about some of those the things that you could do better because you understood that and you took the time to understand that.
Yeah, so basically what we saw is that the communication patterns, I would say, kind of different there in Amsterdam and in Serbian team. So they liked more to just focus on the task, just made a few prototypes, understand how it goes, just making some initial approach and then go from there. Where in Amsterdam we try to be kind of preventative states, that we just try to discuss the questions as they appear, uh, to just to understand as much as possible before we start coding. And well, we tried to do some kind of merge merging of these approaches, so they still do work on their own, but we had some kind of alignments where they could ask questions, and where like each feature we just discuss, okay, what could be there, what kind of challenges could we face, so we at least aware of it. And if there are some challenges, we just try to mention it even in Jira, just write, okay, so for this stuff you can ask this and this person. And also probably it helped me to understand that there is not only approach that we have in Amsterdam, because you just get used to it, right? The way you work, and it's hard to get that other people could work in a different way. And that the part that took a lot of time for me to change, because, well, you think you think that what you do is right, and that really helps to just evaluate and really try to understand. And I think that it was easy, and I did a lot of mistakes there, because also, well, I wasn't that knowledgeable in the project myself. So till that point I was working for like 1 year, and it was like I just only started like bringing some actual value.
Yeah, no, I think that's really cool, and I like what you just said that it's very easy to become so used to what you're doing that you think that is like the best way of doing it. But to be aware that different people work differently, and again, why I admire the model so much of being a team lead on a project by project basis is that it's a really good opportunity to step outside of that comfort zone and get a little bit of perspective. Even if you don't change your way of working, even if it's just to say, like in your case, like for example, the way the Serbian team likes to work doesn't work for me. Uh, just being aware of that and having that reminder, I think, is really useful because again, it's something that's very easy to take for granted, which is really cool. And then on a sort of like broader and in a sort of closing question, what was one of the biggest lessons for you from this experience? Like, what is something that you will take forward and potentially apply to the next time you do something like that?
Um, well, for me, it was that the code is not the most challenging part of your job as an engineer, and yeah, that changed my mindset a lot. That I started thinking, like, changed it from the product size. I mean, for yeah, product parts, that I need to understand how to explain uh, my solutions as an engineer, but also from the people's part, I think it's I just starting to give more empathy and actually understanding the people, not only trying to like just be tough on my solutions and my way of working. And yeah, I think it helped a lot also to just because it was also my first experience as a this kind of feature based tech lead, so that I was able to understand that you need to just get into somebody's skin and just see things from their point of view. And it helped me a lot with the communications that I had, like in all, even when the project was done. And it helps now a lot when we move this to this approach of empowered team, because when you do see some like impediments, when you do see some like stuck tasks, it usually it could be that just something is very complex, but it also sometimes you just need to understand what's going on with the person. So you just approach someone and ask how they're doing, and maybe they need some help, or maybe they need some help to offload some tasks from them, or just pair program or something like this.
Very, very interesting, and thanks so much for sharing your experience. I learned a lot, and it's really cool to hear someone who had to go through something for the first time. I'm a particular fan of those experiences. I think it helps you also learn from first principles and sort of, as I said just now, sort of get that new perspective and get that refresher. So yeah, thanks so much for your time and chatting to me on the podcast. It was really, really cool.
Yeah, thanks for your time. I really enjoyed it.
And hopefully we'll chat soon again. I think, yeah,
Yeah.
I would like to chat to you more about some of your team structures. I think they're really cool. And
Mhm.
otherwise, yeah, even just check in on your noisy neighbors and see how their kids are doing. But yeah, we'll chat soon.
Thanks. Bye bye.